For real, for serious, bro. I'm rolling to the... You gotta puff a on this one.
They were once the world's most powerful couple, Beyoncé and Jay-Z. Not just music icons, but symbols of success, of a billion-dollar empire that embodied the American dream. But now, behind the perfect photos, behind the sold-out tours and chart-topping hits, a storm is brewing, ready to explode. Jay-Z isn't just facing another scandal. This is the kind of revelation that could bring down the entire Carter empire, an alleged secret son, and worse, a child who may have been conceived when the mother was only 16. This is no longer gossip, no longer whispers. It's the crack that threatens to shatter the walls Beyoncé has been holding together for years. I've forgiven. I've been silent. I stood by through the betrayals, through Solange's elevator blows, through the times he bowed his head on stage. But this time, I'm not sure I have the strength anymore. Somewhere else, Rymir Satterthwaite, a young man whose face eerily mirrors Jay-Z's, has been fighting for over a decade to claim something heartbreakingly simple: the truth. He's not after money, not after fame. Just a question left unanswered. Who am I? Do you even realize what you're losing, Jay? Not just a child, but the woman who stood behind you, shielded you, even when the whole world turned its back. And now, as Beyoncé quietly calls her lawyer, preparing an exit strategy crafted not just with emotion, but with contracts and signatures, the world knows. This storm can't be silenced anymore. It's about to sweep everything away. Behind the polished smile and flawless stage presence, Beyoncé was calculating her next move. While the world saw power and perfection inside the Carter household, the seams were splitting. For years, Jay-Z had kept the paternity scandal at bay. Legal teams, closed doors, sealed records. Everything was handled behind curtains. But now, with a court order looming and the media catching wind, the shadows were no longer safe. In Philadelphia, Rymir Satterthwaite sat in a small apartment, staring at the latest court documents. He wasn't a boy anymore. He wasn't a story someone could erase. His fight had lasted over a decade, pushing through dismissals, legal blockades, and whispers calling him a liar. "I just want the truth," Rymir told reporters. "That's all I've ever wanted." But truth is dangerous to those with something to lose. Beyoncé watched as Jay-Z's silence became heavier. She had seen the calls ignored, the letters unanswered, the negotiations break down when the details of Wanda's age came up. What once felt like a manageable storm was now spiraling into something far darker. She wasn't just thinking about her marriage anymore, she was thinking about her children, about Ivy Park, about a billion-dollar legacy tied to her name. This wasn't about walking away in a fit of anger. It was about protecting what she had built with relentless care. Jay, can you really outrun this? Can you hide behind songs and lawyers forever? While Jay-Z played defense, Beyoncé began assembling her own team: lawyers, financial advisors, publicists. Quietly, methodically, she prepared for a future without him. And as the headlines multiplied, so did her resolve. For years, she had been the shield. Now she was preparing to be the architect of her own escape. The house was quiet, but Beyoncé's mind was a storm. For months, maybe even years, she had been balancing on the edge, torn between loyalty and survival. She had stood by Jay-Z through public shame, personal betrayal, and countless whispers, holding the Carter empire together with grace and grit. But now the cracks were no longer invisible, they were everywhere. She had asked him more than once, "Please, just take the test, end this before it destroys us." But Jay-Z, wrapped in pride, had refused. His empire had been built on control of his music, his image, his story. Admitting vulnerability was a threat more terrifying to him than any court ruling. And Beyoncé realized this was no longer a marriage, it was a cage. She looked at her children, at Blue Ivy, at the twins, and knew they were watching how their mother responded to crisis, to disrespect, to abandonment. What lesson would she leave them if she stayed silent, if she chose appearance over truth? She thought back to the early days when they were just two artists chasing dreams before the billions, before the scandals. Back then, love was simple. Now, it was strategy. Beyoncé wasn't just an artist or a wife. She was a brand, a symbol, a leader. And the scandal surrounding Jay-Z wasn't just his anymore. It was tangled in her contracts, her fashion lines, her Netflix deals, her legacy. In the late hours, when no one was watching, she began making the calls. Quietly, carefully, lawyers, financial advisors, crisis managers, not to explode the marriage in public, but to prepare for impact, to be ready when the fall came. She sat in her dressing room one night, looking at her reflection under the harsh lights. There was no makeup strong enough to cover the exhaustion in her eyes. Jay, you always believed you were the architect of your empire. But you forgot. I built half of it. For Beyoncé, the choice was no longer about love, it was about survival. For Jay-Z, control had always been his armor. From the streets of Brooklyn to the boardrooms of billion-dollar companies, he had mastered the art of narrative. No matter the scandal, a diss track, a cheating rumor, a business fallout, he knew how to flip the script, how to turn crisis into legacy. But this time, the cracks were deeper. Behind closed doors, the calls were no longer just about music tours or brand deals. They were about damage control. His advisors spoke in hurried tones, trying to calm sponsors, drafting statements they might need, but hoped never to use. Jay-Z sat in silence as they circled around him, his hands steepled, his jaw tight. He had always been the one to walk ahead, to lead. But now he was frozen, because this wasn't just a headline. This was a sun, a living, breathing question mark he had spent years pretending didn't exist. The more he avoided, the louder the noise became. The more he denied, the more Rymir pushed forward, court motions, interviews, music, social media. Every closed door Rymir faced, he found another to knock on, and every time Jay-Z rapped about the past, threw shade in lyrics, the public heard, not confidence, but fear. At home, Beyoncé was watching. She saw the man she had loved for decades slowly corner himself. The man who had once seemed untouchable now looked exhausted, distracted, aging under the weight of his own secrets. And in the spaces between their conversations, in the silences that had become their new language, Beyoncé understood something Jay-Z didn't. The empire they built was no longer just his to protect. And the moment she chose to walk away, the cracks he had hidden for so long would no longer hold. Jay, the storm is here. And this time, no amount of power, no lyric, no lawyer can keep it from breaking you open. For most of his life, Rymir Satterthwaite had been a ghost, a name behind sealed court papers, a face avoided by cameras, a story few dared to print. But that was changing. He wasn't a teenager anymore, and he wasn't asking politely. He was knocking louder, standing taller, and refusing to be dismissed. His voice, once shaky with doubt, had found strength. Every interview, every podcast, every post on social media carried the same message. I just want the truth. They called him a clout chaser, a liar, a kid looking for a payout. But Rymir didn't flinch. He spoke calmly, sometimes tired, sometimes angry, but always clear. I work 2 jobs, I pay my own bills, I'm not asking for money. I'm asking to know who my father is. The media, once hesitant, now circled in. Headlines multiplied. Old photos resurfaced. Speculation grew, fueled by the rumors of Jay-Z's legal delays and Beyoncé's quiet withdrawal from the narrative. Journalists reached out. Fans debated online. Every step Rymir took brought the story further out of the shadows. At night, he sat in his small apartment, staring at his phone, wondering if this would be the interview that finally changed something. His mother's voice echoed in his mind, her warnings, her hopes, her heartbreak. And still, he kept pushing. "You can't erase me, Jay, no matter how many doors you close." In music, too, Rymir found a weapon. He released songs laced with his story, raw, unfiltered, unapologetic. He wasn't trying to battle Jay-Z on the charts. He was carving out his own space, his own truth. And outside the Carter empire, beyond the marble walls and brand deals, people were starting to listen. A son's search was no longer just his. It had become a public reckoning. The world watched, holding its breath. What began as a quiet paternity claim had become a storm, threatening to pull apart one of music's most powerful empires. Jay-Z's silence, Beyoncé's quiet preparations, Rymir's relentless search, all of it had led here. Inside the Carter home, Beyoncé moved with purpose. She wasn't packing bags in a rush of rage. She was documenting, calculating, preserving. For every dollar in the empire, she knew where it came from, who it touched, and what would happen when the papers were filed. She had given Jay-Z chance after chance, but there was no saving a man who refused to save himself. Outside, the media frenzy escalated. News vans lined streets, paparazzi camped at every exit. Fans online split into factions, some defending Jay-Z, some championing Rymir, most watching Beyoncé with awe. She wasn't crumbling, she was rising. Jay, in his inner circle, paced. Meetings blurred into arguments, statements were drafted, then scrapped. His empire, once untouchable, now felt fragile, a house of cards trembling with each new headline. He had outrun rivals, critics, even the ghosts of his past. But this was something he couldn't out-rap or out-lawyer. And in the middle of it all, Rymir stood, no longer a footnote, no longer invisible. His fight had become a symbol of truth denied, of dignity stolen, of the human need to know where you come from. The reckoning wasn't about money, it wasn't about gossip, it was about legacy. For Beyoncé, it was the moment she chose herself, not as Jay-Z's wife, but as her own force. For Jay-Z, it was the moment the mirror cracked, showing the man behind the mogul. For Rymir, it was the moment the world finally saw him. When the dust settles, the Carter empire may survive, or it may shatter. But one thing is certain. The truth has a way of rewriting everything. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We're curious to hear what you think. And if you want to stay updated as this story unfolds, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notifications. Because trust us, there's going to be a lot more drama coming. See you in the next video, Betties.